Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this first episode of Solar Architecture Voice. So, as you know, this is a new format developed within the INPERSO European project, where we're gonna explore how photovoltaics is transforming architecture. It's a new dynamic format developed by SUPSI in Switzerland, and most important is interactive. So it's not a classic and usual webinar. We will start this episode with a talk by Pierluigi Bonomo. And today's episode is Innovation First 40 years of photovoltaics as a building material. And we will look back at the journey of BIPV from 1982 to today. And after that, we will open the floor to you, so with the impossible question session. Question, of course, made by you and to the today's speaker, of course. So feel free also to send these questions also during the presentation, so we can collect it and read it after the presentation. And so we are ready to start. So I will leave the floor to Pierluigi Bonomo, the head of the SUPSI BIPV team here in SUPSI, to introduce today's team and set the stage for our discussion.
Amazing. Thanks, Greta. Thanks for your introduction, and also very welcome also from my side to everyone, and good morning. Yes, you introduced me. I'm Pierluigi. I work as a senior researcher at SUPSI, and today I have also the honor of starting this series of 3 webinars thanks to that we are organizing thanks to INPERSO project. So I will try to start with some inspiration, and as Greta already said, I guess the most interesting part is also expected from you and from your questions. So I hope that you can correctly see the screen, so I can go ahead with some next slides. So today we are talking of solar panels. No, I'm joking. We are talking, of course, we are trying to talk about the evolution of the use of photovoltaic as a building material. So I would say about PV in solar PV in contemporary architecture. As most of you already realized, I chose an impossible title, an impossible mission for this topic. So let me immediately clarify that I don't want to be academic today, and also I cannot pretend, and I don't pretend to describe the full evolution of solar in architecture. Mainly for 2 reasons. First of all, because in part we already did this job in a few articles and also in a very nice book we are preparing for printing. So please contact me if you are curious, and there are many other texts to have more detailed information. The second reason is that, as Greta introduced, this webinar is meant to be open and fast, so a space where also you can interact and you can draw some inspiration from this sector. So essentially, I will just try to inspire and share with you a vision. So let's see if I can. Maybe another introduction that today I decided to only use images in the slides, so you won't find any text. I decided this because I guess images and pictures don't just explain, but also really try to evoke. So they try to suggest something without forcing a meaning. So architects, I guess, know very well this role of pictures. So that's why I started with this photo. Apparently, as you can see, there is no PV here, but I'm convinced that for an architect and the urban designer, you already get where PV is, because clearly I took this photo in a campus some months ago, and you can clearly see on the ground of this urban space how solar cells are drawing a play of shadows and light in this urban ground. I think this is a very nice play of light in this architectural space, and this is how typically some solar technologies can create rhythms and life from solar cells in an urban space. Well, we have been talking about photovoltaics and integrated PV since long time. At SUPSI, it's 40 years, and in my case, it's more than 15. But most of the time, this sector started from technology. So started from PV, from solar technology, and we tried then most of the time to solve everything from there. Honestly, I've also believed, I've always believed that technique is a starting point. It's a good start, but if we talk about buildings architecture, there is much more. Despite we have great lessons, this is a building of 1982 by Thomas Herzog. Already at that time, integrating the solar cells that you have seen in the previous slides in glasses, or in these greenhouse glasses, using PV cells in facades, but it stayed an experiment for many, many years. And I use often this picture because I'm convinced that for a long time we were a little bit in some sector trapped in the idea of sustainability as a medicine. I use this metaphor because, you know, like sometimes it seems something we need, but we don't like in a certain way. So still today, when we talk of solar, of photovoltaics with some professionals, it's a little bit, I get some faces like children take syrup. But there is also the opposite. That's the ideology of PV everywhere at the same time. And I honestly, I think that neither works, and that the answer, the real answer, should be something in between. This is because I'm convinced that if the idea is of ubiquity, of everything becoming acceptable, we should also be prepared to these results. And nothing really means anything at this point. So as I introduced, I've been part of SUPSI since 12 years, and I found here a very fertile ground in this sense, in a sense of research and architecture where energy necessity meets character of buildings and of architecture. So I tried also to set my research and development in with a standpoint merging and letting interact industry, innovation, and architecture together. So this is what we can obtain today with a long journey of the technology. I'm convinced, as I said, that we must know the rules of technology. This is essential because if we know technology, we can play with it. We can play with the techniques. I'm convinced that architecture is not just how to say, like a plug and play solution. So we need really to consider also the solar technology within the wider perspective of creating spaces and possibly good spaces for people and for communities. So PV in buildings and in architecture has a very long history. As I said, I'm not going in detail, so I will try just to highlight some parts of this journey. Of course, if you are interested in more details and on projects and on really solar buildings, please take the chance of visiting solararchitecture.ch. It's our web platform documenting all this long journey, including also videos, docufilms, and many interesting stories. But mainly in the next slides, I will try just to keep a very high level, a kind of vision on the main waves, and honestly trying to put an open space for our shared inspiration and maybe to interact also in the next part of the webinar. So let's start with a provocation here. So I used this picture, maybe some of you know this window. This is a glass window from a famous brand you can recognize that appeared in many of our cities some years ago. And you can see a PV in this window. And I guess that too many experts ignored this provocation. We could talk a long time, I guess, on it, for example, on the meaning of integration. We talk about integrated PV. So can something be at the same time symbolic and functional, for example, or does one cancel the other? This could be a question. Or also, if we go on more substantial aspect, we can talk about ephemeral gesture of using solar, or versus maybe deeper and profound science of designing it. What makes integration superficial? It's a lack of function, or it's a lack of symbolism, or a lack of culture. So I think these are very important topics today to play with. Again, if we have a solar symbol in our cities, what about the urban and cultural meaning of the technology? So a window like this, or let's say facades in general, can they become also urban energy displays, really visible, where technology, identity, and awareness and culture meets together? Of course, we are all thinking to a question that do we risk to turning sustainability in a branding, but at the same time, can a branding actually drive a real change? So I wanted to start from this little reflection to then go to real buildings. This is an example not far away from our campus from '94, one of the first buildings using photovoltaics in facades. And in general, in '90s, as we know, the use of photovoltaics were essentially the use of PV panels used like bricks for facades or like tiles for roofs. So it was at that time something really raw in expression, honest in a way, and sometimes also extreme, we can say. But this had a great advantage. The buildings you are displaying here led to the concept of plus energy buildings, thanks to the use of solar energy in all the surfaces. You see this building in Ticino. We were part of this pilot building more than 10 years ago using PV panels in different facades, in balconies, in canopies. So the plus energy concept also in most of this period. And different approaches, okay? Also in some context, the expression was, as I said, really evident. Arriving also to an energy shaping buildings themselves. So all the topic of the shape of buildings and energy optimization, it was, and especially at that time, important. We have also in mind the great feed-in tariff period at that time, and so on. I can recognize also a kind of second wave, maybe of use of this technology in buildings, mainly, let's say, inspired by, in my opinion, a kind of dialogue, the start of a dialogue of PV with other materials and other technologies. So essentially, for example, in these few pictures, we see photovoltaics also starting a dialogue, for example, with other materials. I'm particularly very linked to this image. It's my first project that I designed and I built more than 10 years ago, 15 actually now, where I used PV facades in a dialogue with wooden facades, with a concrete, and also with the stones of the old building. This was a post-earthquake reconstruction in my city, so I really liked at that time to use photovoltaics in a dialogue between the pre-existence within the remembering the past and in a kind of future outlooking of new technologies. And other examples where we see PV also in a quite simple form of a panel, but in a relation with other texture, other materiality of architecture. Till two examples where we see entire surfaces finding and looking for a dialogue with the surrounding landscape, with the urban environment, or also with the natural landscape around the building. So essentially, thanks to this relation between research, innovation, and industry, let's say that PV no longer dictated by cells, color, and texture, step by step became a kind of natural material for architecture. So really part of environment and of cities. So super interesting examples in my opinion, with architectural expressing PV really just as a normal building component. So no limits. I used this picture to see a very customized approach, in this case also with a particular fixing system. So huge customization levels today are possible. I put also this picture, it's not a mistake, but I wanted a little bit also touch upon the topic of technology and history. We sometimes, at least me, sometimes I believe I hear some surreal debates regarding the use of technology, like if technology doesn't belong in historic sites and so on. But I'm fully convinced that history has always used the technology of its time. So I guess many of the time it's also sometimes a poor design culture, putting technology and history one against each other. Because I'm convinced that if design leads and not technology, everything is possible. Of course, I put this image because maybe I would not say that we can cover, we see here a famous villa in Pompeii, heritage. Maybe we cannot cover Pompeii with solar panels, or can we? I'm not joking, because an Italian demo project demonstrated it. You see the roof of this very famous villa heritage that was realized with a new tiling using customized and mimicry solar panels. So I want just to remark that a dialogue is possible, essentially. Also, I want to be very honest that with this approach also there is some bad side too of using PV in a mimicry approach. I'm a building engineer and architect, and I think sometimes the sector is a little bit obsessed with the topic of mimicry. And I said before that architecture is not a plug and play solution, but I'm also, in my opinion, architecture is also not a PV panel with Mona Lisa in front. So just to be clear on it. A quick look also to what can be the expression of other solar technologies. We have seen so far 90% of the examples I displayed were based on crystalline solar cells. Most of us have in mind this technology, but there are also other generations of PV. It's the case of what we call sometimes third generation with organic systems. This is an example in Switzerland, in Lausanne, of a facade, of a shading system for a facade with an organic technology. And in general, so for example, lightweight and different technologies can be also really spectacular in the expressive potential. This is an example in Basel. It's the Novartis campus with this media facade, thanks also to the solar shell. To describe the last wave and approach the conclusions, I like also to mention what what Renzo Piano calls solar machines. Essentially, we are publishing also a book with this title, with the same title, with thanks also to the collaboration of great international architectural firms. And the sense of this approach is essentially solar as a part of the city. So not just buildings, but also solar in urban spaces in a way. And there are some nice examples. So this one is by BIG Architects in the US. It's a very famous campus. Or other pavilions used also for temporary construction. We are in the Netherlands here. Or what I like to display just as I guess emblematic of this wave is what we call the solar carpets. So really these solar elements flying over buildings, flying over volumes. This is an example by OBR office in Milan. Or from Renzo Piano Building Workshop, the CERN Gateway campus in Geneva, again with these solar carpets flying over the volumes. So yeah, approaching to the conclusion, essentially, as I introduced at the beginning, I mean, honestly, I don't believe that there is a right or a wrong approach, but we have seen and we are still seeing today the many and different waves of innovation in this sector. And I just believe in freedom in design, so the freedom of shaping the language of architecture. And yes, and what I mentioned, essentially, that sometimes interaction between innovation, architecture, and industry can be also a key point. I used this picture also and a few other pictures because so far I mainly talked about technology, but I'm fully convinced that technology is not enough. And today the missing point is people, is still knowledge and awareness about the potentials of this field for our cities. That's why we are here today, and we are doing also many other initiatives like training courses and also videos and films and whatever can try helping in education and training, essentially. So we are working also thanks to these and other European projects. We are also part of the International Energy Agency, so we really try to focus also on this on the topic of raising capacity, raising especially awareness, I would say, around this topic. So yes, in conclusion, maybe just another few slides that I wanted to use to really conclude my part and opening maybe with some interaction with you is this building. I took this picture more than 10 years ago in London. And this building really, at that time, convinced me in continuing in BIPV research. I was a little bit at the beginning. I displayed this in several conferences, events during the years after. And as you can imagine, PV expert hate this photo. Because of colored cells, because of shading. You can see a tree blocking irradiation on panels, and clearly non-optimal conditions for energy production. But architects still love it. Still love the imperfection of this situation, which make the solar building alive. And I also loved these crystals of solar cells making a language, making the aesthetics, and also changing color according to the orientation and to the sun position. And I remember the feeling I experienced in the site where really I had the impression that these solar cells were confusing with the natural leaves of the trees in front of the building. So I found it very, very inspiring in keeping together all these aspects. A quick just reminder before opening some also interesting questions and topics from you. that, as Greta mentioned, we will have also next webinars, and this will be the next one with the colleague Jean Didier, an architect leading a Sansoc design studio and telling us the experience in designing and engineering real buildings, also very important European buildings using solar, and you have seen also a couple of them in the previous slide. And yeah, just a conclusion from my side, that a message before opening the Q&A, that essentially is my last my last provocation of the day, I would say. And that, I mean, if we really want that one day solar architecture won't be something just to be tolerated, but something to be really designed and desired, maybe from people, I would maybe conclude with the first image I showed and I commented before, and saying that I'm convinced that also in the solar architecture, also shadow matters. So I guess I can stop here, and I'm really happy to take your questions and also to interact with you.
Thanks, Pierluigi, for the visionary first episode of this series. So as I mentioned at the beginning, so feel free to post your questions in the chat and we are gonna reply to them. So maybe I'll give you a couple of minutes. It can be, of course, related to the picture and to the dialogue that we have with Pierluigi this morning, or to curiosities or anything else related to this field. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Okay, so we have a first one here. So the first one is this one here. So looking back at the 40 years of BIPV, what was the most unexpected lesson learned from the early years of this technology?
From the early years, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think early years had the most challenging issues to solve. At that time, I remember one report from International Energy Agency in 1999. It was, I guess, the first report on, or one of the first on BIPV. One of the conclusions remarked also in the introduction of this report was that photovoltaic had too many limits for architects, and they were mentioned aspects like color, size, cell format, and all these technical aspects that at that time were really a constraint, because we just had solar panels in a very standard format, and we didn't have any other possibility. The lesson, so this was the challenge, but how to say, against the scarcity of means, inventiveness, okay? And this was the lesson from that time, like Thomas Herzog did, but also other architects that did the first pilots. So essentially using also a technology with a raw expression, with, we could also say, a poor palette of customization possibilities, it was anyway possible to express the language of these solutions for buildings. So as I described in this, what I called the first wave, we had photovoltaic expressing solar cells. Also the last building I showed in London, essentially it's a simple solar cells, colored in that case with an industrial simple operation during production, which is expressing the language of crystals. So the great lessons was less technology, more inventiveness. I guess.
Thank you, Pierluigi. So we have one hand raised from Zoher. Sorry for the pronunciation of the name. So I will give you the, yeah, you should be able to talk right now.
Is it working now? Sorry, I'm not familiar with the platform. Is it working?
Yes, we can hear from you.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Pierluigi. It was quite interesting journey going through this different kind of project that you showcased. I'm actually very glad I can quickly introduce myself. Well, I was a former researcher on integration of photovoltaics into building architecture at Technical University of Delft. And unfortunately, I'm not currently working on this field. As you might guess, this is not a very commercialized field, but yeah, most of the things remain in the research. But yeah, I'm very glad, Pierluigi, and that you went through this narrative that architects would have the say in this process, and that's what we need to advocate for in the future. That this is not a technology that's push itself into architecture, but it's more like one of the building components, or like, let's say, building services that eventually need to embed it into the process of design process. And I'm very glad that you didn't use a word of integration a lot more, because I think also that's also a bit confusing concept as well in this narrative, that we are thinking about integrating two things which not necessarily need to be integrated. As soon as the architect is involved in the design process, include a way to embed the photovoltaic into building services, we are fine. And it doesn't matter if it's too expressive or is really embedded, like hidden in architecture. What matters is like the design that is being done by the architect and the concept which is working. So I'm very glad that you have this narrative now, and we are in this moment that we are not talking more about the functions, which matters, of course, with solar technology, but at the end of the day, we are talking about architecture and building, which have their own character and anatomy, which cannot be imposed by any technology. So thanks again. I really enjoyed it. So have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Zohair.
Okay, so we have other questions coming. So the first one is this one here. So technology is advancing rapidly, and soon solar panels might become much smaller and less visually prominent in the modern architecture. So this raises the questions: what will be the future role of solar panel in design? Moreover, while it's relatively easy to integrate pattern solar panels into new contemporary buildings, how can we successfully incorporate them into historic structures? This is the question of Grace.
Okay, so the real challenge is to remember the question. Let's start from the last aspect. Maybe you remember. So the topic of using in historic sites.
Yeah, and what will be the future role of solar panel in design? So more in general.
Okay, good. I think I don't advocate to myself the role of tracing these. I can say from my experience what I see. As I said, I don't see necessarily these different waves of innovation as to say related to a timeline of evolution. As I said, for example, in the first period, there was lower technology readiness, but maybe some more attention, some more focus on using these elements in buildings. Today, we have the paradox of having almost everything possible with customization, but most of the time PV has become a simple cladding. So we also don't recognize nothing more in architecture. I believe that both approaches are fine. I'm not advocating one or the other. So what about the future? I guess the most important part will be to have design, architecture, and city design, especially if we have in mind Europe. Renovation of cities, but not only Europe, will be a key point. So to have solar and architecture and city urban science working and having a journey side by side. Then if it's a matter of expressing the technology or hiding or having a mimicry approach, this is a design topic. So each project should decide and define which is the best approach. Of course, in comparison to 10 or 15 years ago, the technology is ready. Even though we all know that everything is not yet perfect, we are working as R&D also in improving technology, in improving cost effectiveness, in improving standardization, testing, and whatever, but I don't want to be technical today. But I see this, the real challenge is that as a part in the big puzzle of sustainability, solar should play a key role. Just to create a link with history, 1 century ago, we talked about concrete as a magic material. Pierluigi Nervi talked about concrete as a molten stone. It was a kind of poetry and magic aspect, having a stone molten and going everywhere like concrete was. Today, if we want to use the same metaphor, we have another poetry in architecture, because we have the unique material producing energy. An active material, it's the only one I know. So we should try to put together this different dimension, I guess, of functionality, of energy revolution and transition, but also with a transition in city culture and in design culture. I think they are really going hand by hand.
And Pierre, regarding the integration into the historic structure, do you want to add something?
Yes, maybe quickly, because I was really provocative before. I'm not a technocratic person, and I really believe in the approach of design everywhere. Okay, I'm really skeptical on the concept of PV everywhere. This clearly means that in historic area, but everywhere. In urban landscape, in the natural landscape, we need to consider all the aspects driving a design. So if it's the conservation, the prevailing aspect, we should consider technology in the less invasive way. Okay. If we can also insert a contemporary piece of city and of architecture, of course, we can consider new technologies like photovoltaic is. So I really see it not in any ideological terms, but in a very open approach of typical of design. Architects know this very well. I don't have to teach nothing. I know many architects today with us, and this is the natural nature of architecture. The project, the etymology of project is dialogue and compromise. So this is, I guess, the best way.
Thank you, Pierluigi. So we have one other question here from Clarissa. So I'm curious to know how you manage the integration between technology and installation. So is it all done by one company, or do you usually work with the collaborative teams? And regarding the facade or the frames, are they supplied by the same company that sells the PV modules or not?
Thank you. Thanks, Clarissa, for this question, which brings me a little bit to talk about the process. I think this is the other key part. We focus on technology, but the winning part is the process, in my opinion. We were involved in different projects, pilot projects, and other experiences. I would also very simply say that the solution here is a collaborative approach. So this is clearly a field, like many others, requiring early stage dialogue between players. Otherwise, if we have in mind the idea of adding a PV at a certain point of the process, especially in a later stage, I think this is the best way for not having photovoltaic as a construction material. This calls into the field also a very interesting aspect, because today it depends a little bit. We have, of course, very important firms already working with a clearly integrated approach. It's their fundamental and their funding mission. But if we see the everyday market and the sector, there is still a lack of this sometime of a culture of integrated design. So it's the typical example where we risk failing. So coming to your question, if we talk about the value chain and supply chain in BIPV, we all know that it's typically still fragmented because we have a module producer, a glass producer, then we have early stage also solar cell providers and so on, but down we have then fastening system providers, installers, and so on. So here typically there is not one receipt, depends again on the project. There are some companies coming from the construction field, so they typically provide everything, including the fastening system and the installation sometime. In other cases, we have just producers of components. So in that case, it's important to keep integrated the process. So no, there is not, depends. There are different possibilities in the process setup today, because this is not yet also here a fully implemented technology in construction. So sometimes we have also single providers, and it's important to have a figure integrating them. I hope I replied. In case, sorry, if you want some more details, and feel free to interrupt me also.
Okay, so we have another question here from Guna, that is an architecture student. So the question is, how can architects integrate photovoltaics into buildings from the very beginning of the design process, so that energy performance, aesthetic values, and the overall architecture concept works together seamlessly, making photovoltaics an integral part of the architecture rather than an add-on sustainability?
Thanks a lot for your question. I guess you touched the point, the real point. Sorry. Okay, thank you, Greta. How again? I think an architect can reply much. An architect working every day on projects could reply much better than me on it. What I see, we are involved also in real projects, and how, as I said before, it's in a very natural way, driven by design, but going a little bit more specific. If we consider, for example, a glass-based PV technology, depends a little bit on what's the project concept, okay? So I would start from the beginning, which is the energy concept of the project. So if the client asks to have a plus energy building or not, or having different energy targets, this also is influencing the process, because the early stage is the crucial stage where we have the project concept. We need to use the sun, not only in the conventional way of considering the sunlight like a source of daylighting, of heat, or of protecting from the sun for the summer. But we need also to consider that sun is the main source for making surface live and active in producing energy. And this is typically a requirement which is going in contradiction with the others. Take a look to this shading on the ground. The opaque part are shading the sun, but are producing energy at the same time. So they are functioning in a double or triple way, because they are protecting the urban space from the overheating in summer, and they are producing energy. So for example, in that shading, what's the compromise to do in the early stage of the project? It's exactly this. It's what's the power density of the photovoltaic part? But at the same time, if PV call me to have the highest power density because I would produce more energy, the daylight of this urban space require less. Otherwise, I would have a fully dark space behind. So this is exactly when I talked about compromise. It's this. Since the beginning, having an open dialogue So, for example, here having a specialist talking with an architect and with the HVAC consultant and with the engineer, I guess it's the best way, because otherwise we risk that an opaque solar panel in a later stage cannot be applied here in this project and will be not used. So I hope I tried to reply. But it's a difficult question. And thanks for making it.
Okay, so we have other two questions. One is from Dan that actually has raised the hand, so I'll give you the possibility to open the microphone.
We cannot hear from you. If you prefer, you can also write in the chat. Okay, now yes.
Hi, Dr. Perlusi. Daniel speaking from the UAE.
Hi, hello.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question that has to do with end-of-life management. So here in the UAE, there is a huge solar farm, as I'm sure you're aware, and the integration of BIPV, and I use that word lightly, so maybe I should remove integration. The adoption of BIPV in the built environment is beautiful. From your experience, my question is, what do you perceive would be the attention we should give to end-of-life management of BIPV? Because for us, it's not just that the glass is no longer, in terms of its material service life is over. It's that the solar cells also have a reduction in efficiency after, say, 2 decades and then 4 decades. So what do we do with this complexity? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Daniel, and thanks. I'm really getting amazing questions. Thanks for making it. And end of life, yes. So of course, a PV panel itself, we all know the numbers. There are reports from international energy agencies and other institutions telling us how much can be recycled from a PV panel, and it's very high, much higher than 90% in terms of materials. So this is a very good news in a sense. So we are talking with recyclable technologies. For example, in Europe, there is also very interesting dynamics on industry and on research on this topic. So how to valorize also PV panels in a second life and at the end of life. But I'm not involved in PV technology, but rather in BIPV. Yes, we can still use it. What to say? I can say that in the team, in the research team, there are a couple of colleagues working exactly on the topic of end of life of solar facades, because we fully agree with your topic that we cannot, we can no longer have in mind the approach install and forget. Okay, this is too often the approach adopted during past years, especially in big investments without a clear strategy of end of life. It's sometimes that it's changing, of course. Today, very often, this is part of the initial design and requirements to have in mind. We all know that at European level, but not only, there are recycle consortia. So this is a topic already managed. But for BIPV, this is a challenge, because if this is a multifunctional product, if solar cells are embedded in a double or triple glazing or layered with other materials, we still need to understand which is the challenge. So I can confirm we are working on it and on the topic of design for disassembly with another group at SUPSI, and mainly on the end of life scenarios. It's a very interesting field, because we open both technical and economic issues to consider. And yeah, thanks for the question. This will be for sure, I guess, a room for further discussion.
Okay, I think maybe we can have the last questions. Is coming from Samuel. So, in Switzerland, large-scale open space PV installation in the Alps are a controversial topic, especially because of their potential to contribute significantly to winter electricity production. So, you mentioned early that you are not a fan of PV everywhere. From my perspective, the discussion today often focuses too much on the technical or political aspect, while the integration of such infrastructure into the landscape tends to be neglected. So, how do you see this issue? How should we balance energy production needs with the quality and identity of the landscape?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't want to enter political aspect, and which is, of course, a key part of it. You mentioned the Switzerland. This is a clear decision in an act that mainly PV in or on buildings was adopted, and now recently we are dealing also with other forms of application that you mentioned, including alpine, floating landscape, and so on. I mean, it's a difficult question. What I can say is, I would say with the same approach, if we are not talking of a building, but of an urban environment or a landscape, there are other tools for planning at that scale. I guess this is the approach. So considering which are the advantages, impacts, and challenges. So finding a compromise between the energy needs and the preservation. You know that in Switzerland we were also among the founders of the movement of Baukultur. I guess it's clearly highlighted in that document how it's important to find these forms of compromise between the quality of our built environment and landscape and the other imperatives we have today about energy revolutions. So yes, it's not a indication, but it's more to say an invitation in considering the different levels that renewables imply and adopting maybe the same building approach to also higher and different levels, and understanding which are the potentials, and then politically and technically also finding the best compromises. I guess Switzerland was from the building part quite exemplary on this in the past years, with a clear policy supporting the use and adoption of PV in buildings, and still today is. I'm a building engineer and architect, so I'm not an urban planner or city science expert, so I'm fully aware, and I agree with you that there are other challenges in landscape and at higher scale to consider. Yeah.
So thanks, Pierluigi, and thanks to all of you for the incredible and amazing question that actually you've posted in the chat and you raised for today's topics. And yeah, we are approaching actually the end of this first episode, and I want to leave you in the chat maybe some links regarding our platform, solararchitecture.ch, where you can find more information about, for example, buildings. We did a couple of docu-films during these years. So, for example, related to the topic of the relationship between the persistence or the whole buildings and the integration of this technology. We made an interview with a studio here in Ticino, Delta Zero, for the case study Doranio Castle. So maybe it's interesting for you. So I'm going to put the link on the chat. Is in our training section in the website. And the second link is related to this series of webinars. So you can find all the links if you want to join also the other two episodes.
Amazing. Thanks a lot also from my side. Thanks for your very interesting questions, and feel free to contact us for any other curiosity. And I also invite to visit our platform with much more details. Thanks. Thanks again, and have a very nice rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye-bye to everyone.